Hello, my name is Dan and welcome to my garden here in Essex in the southeast of the UK. So we're into July now, and today I'm going to be making a video showing you some seeds you can sow during the month of July. July is a great month for seed sowing because the temperatures are nice and warm, and much of which you sow now you can be reaping the rewards of relatively soon, maybe as early as late summer in some cases, certainly into the early autumn, so that's lovely. Now let's make a start and I'll show you some of the seeds in which you could sow during the month of July. Chard and spinach. So I love to sow these at this time of year because what you can do is get them to a nice size before November or October, November time, when the day lengths get shorter and the temperature tends to drop, thus much reducing or indeed stopping plant growth. And get them to a nice size by then, so don't pick them. And then what you can do is you can pick them throughout the colder months, and that can be really nice. And then at the end of the winter time into the early spring, when it starts to warm up, the plant should then start to grow again, and that way you can get like a second flush, if you will, early next year. So a very nice thing to grow. And with regard to chard, different varieties. There's rhubarb chard, forward hook giant chard is another one I've grown, bright lights. Have a look about, grow one that you like the sound of. And here what we've got here is leaf beet chard or perpetual spinach, so I'll let you have a look at that one. Grow it the same way as chard, and once again treat it the same way. Don't touch it until later in the year, and then you can keep picking throughout the winter months if you've grown enough. And then when it warms up again early part of next year, you can then start picking again for another second flush. I'm sowing this variety of chard, forward hook giant chard, into cell trays of multi-purpose compost, one per cell. This is the way I like to bring on many seedlings initially. Cover with more multi-purpose compost. Keep moist but not overly wet. Put your tag on with the date you sowed it, what it is and the variety. So the case of this, 2nd of July, forward hook giant chard. Lettuce, I have two varieties here that I intend to plant. This is Lolla Rossa, nice red lettuce, like curly leaf. And this one here is lettuce all the year round. And both of these lettuces I really like. You can plant these now, and I would sow them the same way as you saw me just plant the chard. Down here in my bed here of wonderful edibles. So you can plant carrots at this time of year. So I'm going to be planting over the weekend Autumn King 2 in drills, straight sown. So you can see I've got these ones here and I planted them. These are variety James Scarlett Intermediate, and they went in on the 24th of March. And you see they've made some nice progress. You can eat the tops as well with carrots, so a very versatile crop to grow. And beetroot. So the varieties I'm going to be growing are Boltardy and also Cylindra. All these seeds here came from Wilco's. I'm also growing a white albino beetroot here, which was straight sown, I think, on the 24th of March. So you can also bring beetroot on in modules. So you saw how I did the chard a moment ago. What you do is maybe put like 2 or 3 beetroot seeds in a cell tray, and then what you can tend to get is maybe 3 or 4 from each seed, maybe more, maybe less than that. There is a variety, I think it's called Moulin Rouge, which doesn't give you too many per seed. You might wish to try that one out if you're overly concerned about getting, densely congested beetroot, if you will. But straight sown, modular sown, either way, and beetroot's great. It could stay into the ground until around the end of the year without it going too woody. So beetroot's a great one to grow, and you really want to look at the health benefits of beetroot. It has been said it enhances athletic performance, which is one reason why athletes drink beetroot juice, etc, etc. So look into the health benefits of beetroot. This spinach is looking very healthy. I planted that earlier in the year. This Boltardy beetroot starting to make a nice size, so one could pick that now. You could say, or at least I think, the minimum size you want to be picking Boltardy beetroot at is maybe around golf ball size. If you look at a lot of beetroot used for pickling, it is about that size. So there we are. But I'm going to let these get a little bit bigger, but I'm happy so far with their progress. This white albino beetroot starting to bulk up nicely. Be looking forward to trying those. down here with part of my hopefully huge peach crop. But yes, you can plant turnips at this time of year. I've got two varieties here. This is Snowball and this one here is Purple Top Milan. I would straight sow these thinly into a drill, and then hopefully you'll be getting your turnips, and you can also eat turnip tops as well. So turnips. I had to support the branches there using a piece of clothesline and a bungee there because the weight of the peaches was bringing the branch down. Radishes. Radishes are very quick growing, and you could plant summer radishes at this time of year, and this is variety French Breakfast 3. It's like a cylindrical radish. You can also get globe radishes as well. You could also put winter radishes in at this time of year, and a variety of that would be Mouli. I think it's also known as Daikon, so you could look at putting those in. I would straight sow them thinly. You can be eating radishes relatively quickly, maybe within a month or so, something like that. Certainly one of the quicker crops to plant, and you can also eat the tops. Nice in salads, ready very quickly, so plant your radishes, people. Plenty of grapes to come. Spring cabbage. This is variety Durham Early, so you could plant these now. I would bring these on initially the same way as you saw me plant the chard earlier on in cell trays of multi-purpose compost. Hopefully they will produce heads around March, April next year, so early springtime, and they're perfectly hardy, so you would plant these out after you initially brought them on around September, October time into the open ground, and there we are, spring cabbage variety Durham Early. You could even consider overwintering them in a polytunnel or a greenhouse. That way you may end up getting the crop a little bit earlier than had you planted them outside in the open ground. Looking like a good year for this apple tree. This is variety Gala. It's carrying quite a crop actually for a relatively small tree. Cool, look at these. These are Tayberries. Beautiful. Good year for them. So you can plant oriental greens. So here I've got Chinese salad cabbage, yellow pak choy, another variety of pak choy, and Wong Bok Chinese cabbage. So regarding oriental greens, oriental cabbage, pak choy, etc., they can bolt if they are exposed to longer days, which is why it's generally recommended that you grow these over winter time. So what you can do is plant these now, and then you probably end up planting them out maybe in 6 weeks or so, something like that. It's when the mature plants get exposed to the longer daylight, if you plant them earlier in the year, that they can then bolt. So by growing them at this time of year, hopefully you can avoid that. You might wish to consider delaying growing these until maybe later in July, or maybe even into next month. But I'm going to be growing these 4 varieties of oriental greens here, so it'll be quite exciting to see how they do. And the way I would grow them would be initially bring them on in cell trays, the same as I will be planting the Durham Early cabbage and the Swiss chard and the spinach. Komatsuna Japanese green, otherwise known as Japanese mustard spinach, and grown this before. I've never sown it at this time of year. I've sown it in the spring and also later as an overwintered crop, but I'm going to have a go at planting it this month in cell trays of multi-purpose compost, and it's a nice tasting crop and ready very quickly, within about 4 to 6 weeks. Small leaves, but ready nonetheless, and they sort of taste like a cabbagey turnip top, and fully hardy here in the UK, very popular in Japan and Korea. So Komatsuna Japanese green, add that one to your list if you fancy having a go at something maybe a little bit different at this time of year. Nice crop of cherries to come. This is variety Stella. You could consider planting dwarf beans, and there's a variety called Speedy which is said to produce within something like 50 to 60 days. What's that, about 7, 8, 9 weeks, something like that. So it'll take us into September time, so perfectly possible you could get a crop of dwarf beans if you planted them now. I would probably once again sell trays to bring them on, then plant them out. You could straight sow them, have a go at that, but dwarf beans, I've got some growing down here. I actually grew a variety of dwarf bean later last year called Rondo, and that produced as well. I sown them much later than now last year, and I had them in the polytunnel, and they were producing dwarf beans, if I remember correctly, around November time, so that was very good. But dwarf beans, you can put them on your list. You've heard me mention many things I'm going to be straight sowing: carrots, turnips, beetroot, for example. So what I'm going to do is, I've watered this already with a watering can, and I'm just going to make myself a drill down here like this. And there's my drill, and just going to thinly scatter these seeds, these turnip seeds, like this. The whole way along. And the beetroot and the carrots I'll be treating the same as well. I don't want to be sowing these seeds too thickly, but what you can do is you can remove seeds or remove them as they germinate, the seedlings. And what I like to do is, as they grow, what you can do is actually pull some out to give the other ones some space. That can be very beneficial. So you can eat some small ones, let some other ones get bigger if they're overly congested, so to speak. So that's a good method of doing it. You want your rows ideally, it's probably recommended about 1 foot apart, but that's about 30 centimetres, but I will be going closer than that, maybe about half of that. So you could have maybe a row of turnips like that, you could have some carrots, then you could have some beetroot, and once again, don't forget your tag that says what it is, so you don't forget, so the variety and what it is. So in this case, turnip snowball. And what you can then do is, a trowel would be better for this, but just cover it over like this, and you've then got a row of turnips to come. They'll probably germinate quite quickly, hopefully ready to eat within about 2-3 months, something like that. Here I have Korean mint. So I'm growing this in a pot. Now, this can be invasive, like regular mint. So if you grow this in your garden in the open ground, you could end up it traveling to places you don't want. So growing it in a pot on a patio would be great. So this is actually licorice aniseed in flavour. There's different variety mints you can get. I think I grew a chocolate one before. So you could get a pot such as this with some growing medium in it, compost, put your seeds in, and then put some multi-purpose compost on top, and then they should grow. And you could also bring them on initially in cell trays and then plant them out. I planted this about probably the early part of last year, maybe even before that, and what it does is it grows up, it dies back in the winter. You can see here, for example, this was some of last year's growth, and it self-seeds, I think, chucks the old seeds out like that. Look, you can see, there's me talking about getting mint everywhere. There you go. But yeah, so you only have to plant this once in effect. Have a look about. So I like to make a tea out of this and get some of this and put it in some hot water, and it makes a nice tea. So if you fancy a mint that's a little bit different, Korean mint could indeed be it. The other day I went to a garden centre to buy some products for a customer. I noticed they had seed potatoes for sale. So they were at a much reduced price. They were stock to clear. So one could consider growing potatoes at this time of year. Now, one could end up running into issues with blight, which is caused by wet and humid conditions. So of course it's warm and could get loads of rain, thus contributing very much to blight. So that's definitely an issue if you choose to grow potatoes at this time of year. So you could look into getting a blight resistant variety of potato. Look on the packet, see what it says, do your own research, and you could maybe try something like that. I'm not going to be growing potatoes at this time of year. I've grown plenty down the allotment which I planted in April, but you could consider doing it, and therefore you could be digging up fresh potatoes in winter time. So certainly a consideration. One could consider, if you grew them outside in tubs, containers, pots or whatever, maybe under a lean-to or something like that, so they've still got light, but you could control the amount of water they got, as opposed to, like, if we get loads of rain and they get loads of moisture, loads of rain, and end up getting blight, you can control the amount that they do indeed get. I wouldn't want to grow them in a greenhouse or a polytunnel in a container or in the ground in there, because of course it'll still be quite warm in there, very humid potentially, which could contribute much more to blight. So yeah, under a lean-to, something like that is an idea. Or you could just, you know, take your pick and take your chance, you know, put them in a container and grow them outside, see what happens. But just be aware you could end up with blight issues. But people have grown potatoes at this time of year, and it is certainly possible. One could consider planting runner beans and also climbing French beans at this time of year. We'll talk a little bit more about doing that in a moment. But if you think that they can produce within 3 to 4 months, so that takes us July, August, September, October, November. It is possible, but of course, you know, there could be a frost, couldn't there? So around November time, but it is possible that it could be done. Now, I'm thinking about giving those a go, or one of those a go. So I've got 2 varieties here, Tender Star, and that's a climbing, you know, your standard runner bean, if you will, that climbs up a pole. And this one here, like a dwarf runner bean, it looks like you could grow that in a pot, something like that. Quite interesting, like a, you know, a dwarf bean, runner bean, if you will. So that's something that could be considered. Now, down here in the southeast, we can get some of the longest growing season here in the UK. If one is living further north, you know, you might want to, you know, think twice about it. Even down here, it certainly wouldn't be guaranteed, but you know, I'm considering having a go at that. So I probably won't straight sow them. I'll probably initially plant them in cell trays and then plant them out. But I'm probably going to plant some runner beans over this weekend, and we'll just see if it's possible. Don't go and do it on my say-so expecting a guaranteed crop, if anything ever is guaranteed in gardening. But if you fancy a bit of an experiment and you don't mind if it goes a little bit wrong, that could be something to consider. Anyway, if you like my work, please feel free to like, share and subscribe, and I'll see you in the next video. Thank you very much for viewing. All the best and enjoy your weekend.